Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Buzzard's Nest podcast. I'm your host, Buzz, and we're going to be talking about today my military life. Let me turn this music down there. That is made by Music Jams, an app for the Android, so I make my music myself. Just in case there's any copyright questions in hand. Okay, I entered the military in 1992, October. And I think Halloween was the last holiday I spent with my family itself. I remember going to basic training, first time on an airplane. A friend of mine drove me down to St. Louis, and I got my plane from there. That's where we left from. My plane bounced around to pick up other people that were normal travelers plus new service members. We went down to... we arrived at Fort Benning, Georgia. And Fort Benning, the home of the infantry and the Rangers. That's where my duty station was going to be. But we were held into Fort Benning's MEP station, where everybody was... brand new, just getting your issue before you go to basic training itself. I think we were there for 2 weeks. This was the first introduction we had into military life itself. And if you go by things at that MEP station on how you think it's going to go, you're wrong. That's the last place somebody's going to be nice to you for a while. Well, at least that's how it was in 92. We went and we did meet our drill instructors at our training post. And I'm sure some people have seen the YouTube videos of the drill sergeant shark attack. You're taking from the MEP station to your training post in cattle trucks, actual cleaned out cattle trucks. There's no seats, nothing, just get in there. You have questions about the situation. You have a problem with the situation. It's going to be the last problem you have. And you pull up, and you're at the bottom of the hill, going up to what would be your barracks, your company, your platoon. And you're going to grab all your gear, everything you have, and run up that hill with it while drill sergeants are screaming at the at the exit to the cattle truck. Get off of my truck. Get up there now. This is not where you belong. Your mother's no longer here. Screaming at you the whole way up the hill because you think each truck pulls up. Each platoon has 3 drill sergeants. A senior drill sergeant, and a junior, just beginning drill sergeant. So there's 4 platoons. You have 12 of those guys all the way up the hill screaming at you. When you get up the top of the hill, you're put in formation, you put your gear down, and they're still yelling at you the whole time. It's not to humiliate you, it's to see if you're going to break. If you're going to break now or any time during this process, you're going to break in war. You're going to break in battle. Probably turn on your own guys. So you're there. You're in formation. You're trying to put everything dress, which is everybody's gear matches the person beside them, the person behind them, the whole platoon. This is how it's going to be put out. It's going to be the same the whole way. It's for accountability. It's easier to see if it's put exactly the same way. And you got drill sergeants still screaming at you. Some examples, if I may.
Don't fuck with me again.
Yeah, you get a lot of that, or...
Here you are all equally worthless.
And that's pretty much breaking you down to let you know that you're not above anybody here. You're not special. You're not going to be treated special. It's going to be a rough ride.
You little scumbag! I got your name! I got your ass!
Yeah, and they pretty much did have our ass. So once you're dressed right, you're out there probably for, well, you got there 10 o'clock, 10 a.m., 1,000 hours, learn to speak right, soldier. And you be out there until it's time for lunch. You're marched to the DFAC, which is your dining facility. You're going to eat. You're going to eat quickly, proficiently. Everybody eats. What was it? The first man up, the last man to sit down means the first man in should be getting up, done from eating. So we all get moving. If you're the last one in there and you were like in the middle of it, you're paying with push-ups. You're paying with pull-ups. Okay, now you're back into formation. Your gear still laying on the cement. One of the drill sergeants remains for guard duty. You're going to grab your stuff. You're going to go through some pulling it out, putting it away, pulling out all your gear. Do you have it all? Were you issued everything? Why weren't you issued everything? Do you have a slip saying why you weren't issued this? Did you take it home, son? Did you already mail it back? Then you're shut up to your platoon. Grab your bunk, choose your place, and it's not pick it out like a hotel room. Oh, I don't like this one. This one's in a bad area. Grab it, go. There you are. Sit, start putting your stuff away. Dress right, dress again. And the drill sergeants started all over again with teaching you how everything will be in a locker. Every locker will match. Every locker will be secure. If your locker isn't secure, it will be wrecked. Everything thrown everywhere, including stuff that wasn't in the locker, like your bed, your pillow. Go find that. Go find your blanket now. In basic training, you're issued wool blankets. Now, I'm highly allergic to wool, so I was issued a second poncho liner, which is a nylon fluffing. It's actually thin and cooler, but luckily the barracks were warm. So that's what I had for a bunk blanket that I had to attempt to tuck in a familiar manner as that of the wool blanket. So I did get a little rousing because I had that, and I got away with not tucking everything in correctly. When I entered the Army, I thought I was going to be the oldest one there. I was 22 years old at the time, which is older. Most people do it right after high school at the age of 18. Most of the people with me were about that age. There was someone a little bit younger than me, 21. And then my saving grace, not being the oldest person in the platoon, was a gentleman that just got in under the limit, just barely. I think it was 32 at the time. 32 was the limit. He was 31. And he was this thin, lanky kid with very thick glasses. I shouldn't even say kid, but he was baby faced, very baby faced. That was, like I said, my saving grace, because he was named Grandpa. In the military, you do get nicknames that stick with you the entire time you're there. And if you go to your normal duty station, the people that went the basic with you go to the same one, you'll keep that name, and he'll catch on with the next group of people. We had a Radar Riley, looked just like him, young baby-faced kid, glasses. We had a Beavis, because he looked exactly like Beavis from Beavis and Butthead, and even talked like him and was dumbfounded like him at times. We had a gentleman, a really nice guy, Hispanic background, and the drill sergeant during the shark attack time, you're supposed to say your name, private, whatever. And he said his name, and the drill sergeant came running up onto him, looked at his nameplate, and said, there isn't enough space on that nameplate for your last name, son. We're going to call you Alphabet because every last letter's there. He didn't mind it and stayed with him. It was kind of cool being out in field training, and you had to find a guy, so you just scream out Alphabet, and everybody knew who you were looking for. Training was, it wasn't that bad. It pushed your limits. A lot of people were breaking down and falling apart because of the training limits. A PT was grueling. I was never a runner. I'm still not a runner. I barely made runs. Luckily for my age, I had a little bit extra time, but I hate running. But I had no problems with the sit-ups and push-ups. But I hated running. Barely made it each and every time. We did live fire exercises in the critical nighttime training where they're firing. They set you up for the scenario that you're going to land nav up to this area. It's barbed wire. It's purified mud. If it hadn't rained, the drill sergeants made sure to douse it with a hose. And it was a giant football field size area. And you're going to low crawl the entire time at night while there are ammunitions going off. I don't want to say the right one. The saw weapons were going off over your head, and they set you up to. This is live fire. These are real bullets right now. You keep your head down here blown off. This is how training is going to be. And people were just freaking. How can you shoot bullets at me? This and that. And deep down inside, you had to be somewhat logical enough that the U.S. military is not going to fire live weapons over your head. It's blank central. And as we're going up, you could hear the misfires of jams because you get that with blanks. But they would start right back up. The drill sergeants knew how to correct the situation, fire it up. And it just kept everybody in a panic. You just got to keep your head about you. You got to keep your calm and cool and go through it. The road marches for miles. I don't think we ever went to a gun range. But no, I got to take that back. The first 2 times we went to a gun range for practice fire in the old cattle trucks again, which wasn't that bad. If you load up and get in, and nobody complains, but you always had a complainer, always did. But after that, it was always marching to everything you went to. Some of the people that did break down that I can remember, a gentleman had foot problems. As soon as he began marching, his foot began changing its arch position. He began getting severe blisters, and he was knocked out of basic training. We had a kid that came from Texas or Minnesota, one of the two. He wasn't with us long. That said this was nothing to him. He's a big bad bull rider. He has trophies at home. And the next thing you know, it was like 2 weeks later, he was gone. He had signed his release to quit. And we're recording at an earlier hour than usual, so you probably hear some road traffic. I'm sorry. Try to clean this up some. Trying to who else went. There are PT failures, but that's normal for basic training for those that leave. We did, not all the people I was with was active duty military. I had some National Guards and reservists that had to do their basic training to qualify and stay in the reserves and the Guard. Who else did we have? We had a very mix of people. I guess for me, coming from suburbia, it was quite the culture shock. Another truck, I'm sorry. Yeah, a lot of different races, backgrounds, people that came into the Army because of unemployment, because of bad neighborhoods, a lot of ex-gang members, but I think we had people that were bringing the gang into the United States Army. If you look that up, that was a bad thing at the time. It might still be, I'm not sure. But yes, every possible gang that existed in the civilian world was somewhere hidden within the military services, all branches just about. We were an infantry basic training group. Some of us were what they call 11 X-ray. The government at the end of your basic training will decide what you become. Mechanized, regular infantry, airborne infantry, if you qualified. But I ended up mechanized infantry. So after basic training, we went on to our specialized training for, I think it was 2-3 weeks. wasn't bad playing with the Bradleys all the time. It was interesting to me. It was enjoyable. I think by the time you get to that point, all the weak ones, the ones that are going to break down, were weeded out already. We often got mail in basic training, and it was a formation deal. It was, if it's nice out, the formation was out in the bottom common area. If it was cold, mail came at a bad time, it was up in your barracks dorm. I shouldn't say dorm because it was all 50 of us inside this one giant room with lockers. But mail was usually call out your name. You don't come out of formation. They just throw it at you. If it was up in the dorm rooms, it was you run up to the drill sergeant and get it. Sometimes packages would arrive in basic training, and there's only certain things you're allowed to have. The sweets, junk food was not permitted, and some people got it. If you got enough to share with everybody, sometimes they'd let you have it. Like if by the time like the big bag of candy was empty, everybody got one piece, that's it. But you weren't having a whole bag to yourself. Many times I've seen packages, when you get the packages, you have to open them up in front of the drill sergeant. Nobody else is allowed to open your mail but you. And you will open it up. And he will reg through it and see what you got. If you got something odd or unusual, everybody knew about it. If you got food that was unpermissible, the drill sergeant would kick the garbage can to you, tell you to crush whatever it is and put it in there. So if your family screwed up and did that to you, you usually got a lot of heat for it. I got one box one time and I took a ton of heat for it because I got like beef jerky. There isn't enough to share there. Doritos, no, ain't happening. But your letters for home were never touched unless they had like felt funky or something. After that, we graduated from basic training, and when I did, my parents couldn't come down to see me because, let's see, that would be the beginning of 93. We had, in Pennsylvania, we had the blizzard of 93. By the time I flew home, there was still snow on the ground. And what was it, January? I think it was March. Was it March? March, April. There was still snow on the ground. I remember that. And I flew up from Georgia, and it was still cold. So I had to dig through my bag at the airport to try to find a sweater, my shirt, jacket, because I came up with my dress greens, and I'm like, I'm allowed to change now that I'm here, but I have nothing warm that's local. Everything was packed underneath the airplane for our stuff. I was home for 2 weeks from basic training. From there, I was going to Korea for 18 months. In those 2 weeks, I don't know if it was depression, the lack of the structure, or what. Every day was just a chill out day. I didn't bother with anybody. I just existed. I probably should have been more motivated, but I just existed. Then I got my flight from Korea. This will be my first international flight. And a lot of Koreans were on the flight, and it's a long ride, 12, 14 hours. And the military, when you go after basic training, you have to be in your dress greens when you go on a flight. And a Korean gentleman had fallen asleep on top of me, literally in my shoulder. I kept nudging him. He'd wake up, fall asleep on me again. But I guess it's a natural thing for them. But it was just bugging the crap out of me. And I arrived in Seoul, Korea, off the plane. And going from an American airport to the Korean airport was more shock for me than anything in this world. every guard working the gate system, the passport system, was carrying M16s. And I was like, wow, did I just really land in a war zone? And a Korean soldier had waved me over to him, and I was like, I swear everything's good. I got all my paperwork. It's in my pocket. I'm good. But he wanted me to bypass the security check-in because I didn't have a passport, and I didn't have to flash my paperwork. He just let me go. I had to wait at a bus, a U.S. Army bus, until I think I sat there for like an hour and a half until all the other planes arrived and we got all the other people that were on the list to be picked up before we went to, again, another type of MEP station that Korea has. There, it's a small, the old-time Quonset hut barracks. Again, everybody's stuffed in them. You don't have any, you do PT, but you have no structure of it, has some kind of job to do. And you do a lot of your in-processing, your shots, get all the equipment you're supposed to have for stationed in Korea. A will. I remember having to do a will. Your insurance. And the listing next to kin and stuff like that. Making sure your dog tags are up, correct and up to date. Do you have both sets? Stuff like that. But it was also referred to as a turtle farm. Now, the area with the Quonset huts were fenced in, barbed wired, and it's like this inside an army base. It's like a base within a base almost. And the reason they called it the turtle farm is because it takes you a full rotation of being there, 1 year to 18 months, to get from the first building, which is in processing, to the last building, which is out processing. Excuse me. I know when I left there, a colonel had made it, I want to say illegal, but not tolerable to call it the turtle farm anymore. So Southern boys began calling it the turkey farm. Because everybody wanders around aimlessly because there is nothing else for you to do until you're at your regular post. After I got all my stuff done, my paperwork had come back wrong. It said I was supposed to go to supply. That I was trained in supply, and I wasn't. I was mechanized infantry. So they had to backtrack my paperwork and make sure it got changed to the correct thing. When I got to my correct company, mechanized infantry, attached to the motor pool. Motor pool is always right beside your barracks because you're in a war zone. Camp Hovey, Korea, I believe it was 15 miles as the crow flies away from the DMZ. So we were in what they call the artillery zone. The first set of rounds would easily hit us in artillery. Not present-day nukes or present-day advancements of missiles. And I arrived, because of my paperwork being screwed up, I got moved to the platoon. It was like midnight. They gave me a key to my dorm room, let me in, and the two other guys that lived in that dorm room, because it should be a two-man dorm, but 3 men live in it, were already asleep. Now, I'm supposed to put all my stuff away without disturbing these guys. I don't know what kind of day they had, so I'm trying to be quiet as possible. I noticed the guy that would be bunking to the opposite of me was under the covers laying on his side, and it was just this huge lump. And I'm trying to be quiet. This guy, from shoulder to shoulder, was massive. He was a big guy. And I'm like, oh, please don't kill me. I'm just a private. I don't know who I'm bunking with. These might be specialist corporals. I don't think it was corporals that wouldn't qualify. I don't need problems. I don't want to cause problems. I just got here. And the guy actually rolled over and said, man, just do what you got to do. Don't mind me. I can sleep through anything. And his name was Humberto Tumbunga. He was from Texas. I never made contact with him again after Korea. I wish I would have. He was a really great guy. I have some stories on him too that maybe we'll save for another time. I was at Camp Hovey, Korea, mechanized infantry. Didn't know if I was going to be a dismount troop or a driver. But I was made a driver, not for any regular sergeant. I was the platoon sergeant's driver. My platoon sergeant was a 6'6" country boy that had come from Minnesota, remained in Korea for the past 8 years, married a Korean woman, 2 children, and hands big enough to palm my face without a problem. Smoked like a chimney and was one of those old-time soldiers. Didn't take gruff. The lieutenant had something to say. He didn't really care because he probably knew more than that new lieutenant ever would. Remember driving for the first time. It wasn't that bad in the wilderness of Korea, I would say, but we went to gunnery range for the Bradleys twice a year. And we had to drive from dirt roads to Korean streets. And that was the most nerve-wracking time of my life, being on those streets with that big, not as big as an Abrams, but a big tank. I always thought I was going to clip a car. Koreans get their driver's license by paying up all their money they need to buy a car. I don't know if they had insurance. I sure hope they did. And driver's license. I don't know if there's training for them. They really didn't act like it. The first sergeant always said Koreans aren't allowed to hit the brake pedal because they'll get a rash if they do. Now, while being stationed in Korea, we drove in a deuce and a half to a lot of the gun ranges. And I think every gun range I went to qualify on for the 9mm, the M16, and I went for the SAW. Every time we had to get a range, we were in a car accident. We rear-ended somebody, and we never made it on time, ever, to these ranges. Because you have to sit there, call the MPs, call the first sergeant. They have to show up wherever you're at, go through all the paperwork, make sure the translator's there. And it was just, it's crazy driving there. I could not be a civilian and drive there. I'd walk everywhere. When driving at Bradley, Koreans have an industrial vehicle that's like a mini semi. I don't know what the real name was for it, but we called it the Terminator. Now, if you've seen a tank coming at you in the road, it's taking up a little bit of your lane. Wouldn't you, in your car, move to the side a little bit and let the tank pass by? Yes. But drivers of Terminators didn't care. They would push a tank off the road. They had more guts than they did intelligence, whoever the drivers are. One of the other familiar things on the road is what we called the one-eyed buffalo. Now, one-eyed buffalo is a rice-field, rotor, rice-field plow. It's motorized. The front 2 wheels are spun by the motor, so it pulls. So what Koreans do to get by the licensing laws and everything else like that, they'll take a trailer, hook it up to the back with another wheel on it to pick the plowing blades up and then drive it on the streets and move their farm product, move their family from here and there. And they're always poking around. They're weaving in and out of traffic and off the edge of sides of roads. And every time you pass one, it's like, oh, please don't get sucked up in my tracks. Please, 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 please. Okay, we're passing. And for my first gunnery as a driver, those are all the things that I came across. We were driving. It was the first time was a beautiful spring day. We were going on a dirt farm road, and we had to stop because the next crossing was a major highway, and I think we had to get permits, the crossing guards, bring the convoy line in together tight so we could pass it quickly. So as we stopped, I'm poking out of the hatch, standing up on my seat, just looking around. We're near a farm. And I see all these dogs running around in this farm field. Many different sizes, types, mutts, what look like a pure breeds, running around. And I asked my sergeant, who lived there, what's all the dogs about? Is this like a kennel or something for like dogs out in the field? He looked at me, pulled a cigarette out of his mouth and said, "Buzzard, that ain't a kennel, that's cattle." And that's what it was. It was a dog farm for dog meat in Korea. So here's another shock to the system. Gunnery was pretty fun. It was my first one driving for. I tried not to have any mistakes because we could get gunnery platoon, which means the top shot, the top performing. And we did daytime fires, and we would go straight into nighttime fires. Now, the nighttime fire, you would have the day off not shooting, but you're wide awake, normal time, reveille, 5 o'clock in the morning, up. But you would have to stay up until everybody was done shooting night fire. It has to be pitch black. You have to be using your thermals. The thermal targets have to be working. Half the time they're not, or you don't see what to shoot, so the range gets shut down. The heating mechanism for your target gets fixed. And you wait in a big line. Everybody's queued up into a line. And the driver always wore like this old time tank helmet. It had ear speakers on it, like over the ear headphones. A cloth part went over your head that had the headphones connected to it, and a hard shell on top. If the tank actually exploded, it's worthless, but that's what I wore. And I had fallen asleep in the driver's seat. Now the motor was on because it keeps the heater on, but I dozed off, and everybody was screaming in their microphones trying to get me on the headphones to wake me up. I would not wake up. I woke up to my hatch being jammed open, whipped open, my platoon sergeant grabbing me by my vest. That's the harness system. Looks like suspenders. It connects to the belt you wear with your canteen and all that. Grabbed me by those, picked me up out of my seat, and screamed to wake up. I was like, I'm up now. But the only reason he did was he was worried about the line was moving. I was only like, I'd say 200 feet away from the back of the other one at the time, but they were trying to get me moving. I thought that was a major mistake. I thought we were going to eat it for that one. But a co-driver, his name was Thompson, that I remember, he was actually doing berm drills in daylight. Berm drills when you drive up this little dirt mound so you can peek over the top with your Bradley's gun and shoot the enemy and hurry up and pull back real quick. He was doing those and actually fell asleep in the position of pulling back and stopped, was waiting for the target reset, and fell asleep, and they couldn't wake him up. They missed the other half of their targets because he wasn't moving. They had to do a no-go and restart. So they didn't qualify as well. Yeah, there were so many adventures in Korea. Presently, there's a YouTube video on Korea about how they don't listen to copyright laws and they'll just copy anything in the world. And as a soldier, I loved that. Back in my day, it was the starter jackets, the big puffy ones that everybody had that were paying big money for. And we could get anything we wanted. We could get any team we wanted put onto these jackets, even stuff that wasn't sports related. And we can get these jackets for like $35 American. everybody had one for the winter. Everybody. I think for my parents, my mom's a big brass items collector, and I had gotten her a Spartan helmet in town, solid brass, $10 American. It was made from all scrap brass from ammunition that these people would go out and sneak onto the gun range and collect up all the brass. Let's see, food was amazing. I love Asian food. I think the weirdest item I ever had was that miniature, little living octopus in rice that's still living. I've had that, but as a sweet dessert. What they do is they let it live in sugar water for a little bit, bring it out, remove the brain, the top of the head and stuff, and it's not supposed to be live anymore. When you add the sweet soy sauce, the chemicals in the soy sauce kick the muscle system back into gear. So it's like living. And you're supposed to grab it with your chopsticks around the top base of the legs, bite into it, and just eat it that way. I didn't grab it right, and the thing suctioned to my face. And it was the most ridiculous thing in the world. I wish I had pictures of it. None of us had a camera with us at the time. The worst thing I probably ate is our Katusa. A Katusa is a Korean augmented to the United States Army. There's 3 Katusas per platoon to help us with languages, to be interpreters, to teach us some of the language and culture. And he gave me what I thought in the middle of Seoul, I forget what it was at the time, 5 million people live in Seoul. Middle of Seoul, he hands me what looks like raisins with sugar and cinnamon, and I love those. So I put them in my mouth. I'm chewing, I'm like, something's wrong with this. And with it all stuffed in one cheek and half swallowed, I'm like, what did you just give me? And he said, it's bees' butts. They chop off the butt end of bees and stir fry it in cinnamon and sugar. And it was horrendous. So I'm standing, me, 5 other people from my platoon, and the Katusa in Seoul beside the big water fountain, and I'm throwing up in a bush because this stuff was god awful. I'd never do that one again. Never, ever. I'm going to stop there with the adventures of Korea. And my next duty base will be stories of Fort Stewart, Georgia was my next duty station. I went from being in high alert status in Korea to a company, I shouldn't even say company, a base that was on rapid deployment. I went from stress to stress. I just want to remind you, on October 30th, we'll be doing our YouTube live event. We're going to do that from 6:30 until 1 a.m. Halloween. During that time, we're going to watch a movie. I got Dementia 13. I'm going to do some intermissions in between. We're going to do some call-ins. I'm going to have some giveaways. So it should be a fun event. It's all to help the Kickstarter and have a lot of fun. Have a lot of fun is the main goal. Getting the Kickstarter going might be the secondary. All right, everybody. Thank you. Have a good one. Don't forget, give it a listen. Later. And another thing, October 30th, live event. If you're still listening, the secret word is bagger.